Hello and welcome to what is likely to be a very rambling review of Anna of the Five Towns by Arnold Bennett. Okay, so I've got a good view of the cover, which as you can tell I got from a library book sale. I got it many years ago and I honestly can't entirely remember why I ended up with Arnold Bennett. I think I was going through a phase of trying to read more literature, especially English literature, of which I don't know all that much, and I'm not that great on English history either, so I thought I'd improve there. And I feel like H.G. Wells, who's an author I very much enjoy, was once discussed in a review of literature as having been not liked, but having been very harshly critiqued in his time. And along with him was apparently Arnold Bennett. And both him and Wells didn't get always good reviews in their day, and they got a lot of backlash from literary critics, and I think that got me interested in Bennett. And then, well, I've got to say, I love this artwork. The artwork sent me down a true rabbit hole as well. This is apparently, according to the back cover, an impression of the potteries in the 1930s by the late Victor Scallon. He was the Wedgwood art director from 34 to 66. And I love this style of artwork. Now, if you go down that rabbit hole, chasing Scallon, you will find that there's almost nothing online about him except about his stint in Wedgworth, China. And apparently he's credited in rescuing it, bringing a whole lot of new artwork to it. But he himself was an artist, and he had an art degree from somewhere I've forgotten. And he was contemporary with Arnold Bennett. So, excellent artwork combined with probably cheap book and sale, and I got this. I didn't do too well in reading it. I've had it for years. I've started it more times than I can tell you. First chapter, yes. Second chapter, not so much. And the furthest I've ever gone through it before was about this far. I found the book mark from last time I tried to read it. This time I have made it all the way through. Now, the reason that I didn't get through it well isn't because the writing isn't beautiful. The writing is beautiful. Arnold Bennett, he born 1867, died 1931. He was a novelist who wrote a lot, and he started in women's magazines, apparently, as an editor, and he wrote those little household hints. And if you ever read a magazine from the 30s and wonder why none of these household hints sound like a woman wrote them, it's probably because they didn't. He wrote most of the ones for his magazines. But he was a prolific author. Anna of the Five Towns isn't his first book, it's his second novel. And, sorry, birds. And it's the first in his series set in the Five Towns. So apparently Bennett was very impressed by an author called Moore. George Moore wrote books set in, I believe, the same area in Staffordshire, which was known for Wedgwood pottery. So it's like, Staffordshire pottery, I've heard of it, Never connected the dots, but hadn't spent that much time in England. Wish I could. So Moore apparently did something that was really new and unusual in his time, and he wrote novels that instead of having romantic French or Italian backgrounds, they actually described the real places real people lived. And Bennett was inspired by that. Apparently it was like a light bulb in the cartoon going on over his head, and he goes, wow, I can set stories in Staffordshire, in the Five Towns. There's actually 6 of them apparently, and I believe now they're only one town, but whatever, where he grew up. And his descriptive powers are formidable, and they make this a really interesting book. His writing is also really good, and that also makes it an interesting book. I've heard that if you keep reading his book set in the Five Towns, which I always thought were 5, but now Goodreads tells me there's apparently 10 of them or something, apparently he develops more of a sense of humour and a lighter touch with characters and so forth. Anna of the Five Towns has very little humour, and it can drag in a few very specific ways, all of them to do with Anna. So I recently saw a meme on Facebook where someone said, I'd recently figured out that the reason I never liked any of these women characters in fantasy is because they were all written by men who didn't like women. I'm not suggesting for a second that Bennett didn't like women, but he didn't really do women very well, based purely on Anna of the Five Towns. Anna has got less dimensionality than a tissue paper. And that was a large portion of why I never got through it before, because Anna is your main protagonist, everything revolves around her, and she is the most banal piece of works I have ever encountered in literature. And let's face it, there's no lack of banal women in English literature. It's like A Tale of Two Cities, a story I deeply adore, has a woman who is basically there to be pretty and good and nothing else. Anna is apparently there to be not very pretty, not very good, and as blank can be. And after a while, that wears thin if your brain isn't fogged with flu or whatever. So this time it was, and it worked well. Anyway, Arnold Bennett was abused for being a realist in an era when realism was out of fashion. And I find it very entertaining that my beloved Jane Austen bursts on the literary world of her time for writing realism instead of romanticism or gothic stories. Bennett, sometime later admittedly, was writing realism and got abused for it because he wasn't writing romanticism or gothic fantasies, and I actually find that very, very entertaining, because I'm me and that's entertaining. He did use the backdrop of Staffordshire and the potteries and apparently whole miles of glowing ironstone. I don't know what that was. A lot of what he writes, I don't know what it is and I don't understand it, but it's still very pretty. So the description that Bennett gives to these pottery fields in Staffordshire when he takes time off from more boring subjects and describes them, they're vivid, they're intense, they're amazing. And from the start, the thing they reminded me most of was Tolkien and Mordor. Or even, actually, a bit more than Mordor, definitely some Mordor. More the devastation that Saruman created around the Tower of Orthanc when he was in his creating orc phase. The description seems so similar. I can't help wondering, had Tolkien been to Staffordshire? Had Bennett been to Tolkien? I don't know. But I really enjoyed those descriptions. I liked the realism of it very much, but I did think the lack of humour was a bit sad. And the first of the 5 set in the era, the one lacking humour, I made notes while I read it, because I do that. So if you're going to read this book, and I do kind of recommend it, I did end up really enjoying it as a book, as an experience. The writing was gorgeous. Anna was mystifyingly blank and unsatisfying, but funnily enough, all of the secondary characters were actually quite interesting and well done. But Anna is the only one, though you see her from third person, or is it from outside herself, she's the only one who's the main protagonist, and there seems to be nothing in her head, really, most of the time. A lot of people are going to dislike that viewpoint, because a lot of people apparently really like Anna and think she's a whole heap of things that I don't get. So one of the reviews that I read while I was starting this says it's a study in patriarchal authority, and I don't get that. And a lot of people say that Anna's this really strong woman fighting to liberate herself from the cruel bonds of her miserly father, and I don't see that either. She's a very null character. She does what she's told throughout. The summing up chapter says she's always done her duty and what she was meant to do, and she continued to do that, whether she wanted to do it or not. There's also a viewpoint that she was in love with this guy called Willie, and I don't see that. She has no inner life whatsoever. I don't think she loves anything very much. She just doesn't seem to have anything. One of the reasons, incidentally, why I picked up this book when I did was, aside from being sick and needing to rest my eyes on something undemanding, is another booktuber. I hope it's good BookTube etiquette to link him. His name's John Spivey. He does reviews that I actually very much enjoy, and he actually did a discussion of Arnold Bennett, which led to me picking up Anne of the Five Towers. So thank you, Joe Spivey, who will probably never see this, but something that finally got me to do it. While you're reading this, if you read this, you will have problems, probably. I had problems with the fact that A, it's very old and its attitudes are different. So right in the beginning, we start with a 12-year-old girl being called an infant. And women being described based on their bust size. Not terribly politically correct for the 2024s. Still, it wasn't written now. It was written then. Apparently, the bust size mattered. We've got a lot of slang or speech intonations that are obviously meant to be Staffordshire and local. And they certainly set the scene, but luckily there's some interpretations because I would never have got some of them otherwise. The story is actually a lot of fun, and it's the writing that got me through it and which I enjoyed. I often didn't understand the social setting of it at all. So there's one bit in page 21 where it's talking about church stuff, and I really don't understand the churchy stuff. I read a lot of Welsh history a while back, and it kept talking about church and chapel, so I've got a vague notion that these things are real and were really important in people's lives back then. Okay, here it says, untidy Sabbath loafers whom neither church nor chapel could entice, and the primly clad respectable who had not only clothes but a separate deportment for the seventh day. That sort of language, and it's fun, and I enjoyed it. Didn't always understand it. Did always enjoy it. So, what is this story about? I'm behaving as if everyone knows what it's about, but the plot centres around Anna Tellwright, and I'm not pronouncing that like a Staffordshire would because there's a pronunciation of her name later in the book which I totally failed to understand was referring to her at the time. She's the daughter of a father called Ephraim Tellwright. He made money through being miserly. Now, he's not a particularly nice guy. He's a bad father. He's a bad person. But honestly, this book seems to think that his main negative is being miserly and not spending money. So this fact that Anna now has a lot of money when she comes into her majority from her mother is a good thing, but the fact that he's miserly and saves money is a bad thing. And there's some sort of weird social condemnation and opinion happening that I don't quite understand there. But obviously her father's the bad guy. And I've got to say that based on the 30s, I don't think he's that bad. He's not a lovely guy. He's not a nice guy. He doesn't waste money. He's not particularly good to his two daughters, but he's nowhere near as bad as some are. So I don't quite get what Arnold Bennett was doing there. And later on, there's actually a small paragraph where he describes why Ephraim Tellwright is like that. It's because he's always been like that. He's just mimicking what his father and his uncles behaved like, and now he's behaving like that. And he's got no self-analysis to bring down onto his actions and to wonder why not only his daughter is always unhappy in his house, but he himself is. It's weird, and it's a bit sad, and it's not dwelt upon too much. So, it's all based around the Methodist Church, which her father belonged to and she belongs to. And according to Wikipedia, the novel tells of Anna's struggle for freedom and independence against her father's restraints. And I call that out as complete BS. Anna never does anything. Her father gives her money and she's confused because she's never been taught to use it when she reaches her majority. She's wooed by a man who she doesn't not like, and she does start to like him because he's there, but we get no emotional insight into Anna's actually caring about him in any fashion. Now that she has money, she's been taken up by the neighbours across the road. And they sponsor her and they take her places. And we're told that she enjoys it. But again, there doesn't seem to be any real emotional life under that calm, flat pool that is the Anna, that Bennett writes very, very blankly. Anna's got a half-sister, Agnes, and she keeps house for him and his father. Her father gets angry with her when she starts to express a few opinions, and eventually favours Agnes over her. And each chapter has a thing that happens in it, that take us through the story. And the chapter headings actually are rather deceptive. There's a lot of foreshadowing that bad things are going to happen. And honestly, bad things happen throughout this book. Bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. And the foreshadowing is unkind in that it sets you up for something bad to happen to Anna. And nothing bad happens to Anna. Really, nothing ever happens to Anna. But the final chapter is End of a Simple Soul, which made me assume that Anna was going to die or something worse happened to her. No, nothing happens to her. She's the simplest simple soul I've ever met, but it happens to someone else. Chapter 11 is called The Downfall. It's not her downfall. It's not really a downfall at all, because it happens to people we aren't personally connected to. The people it does happen to, Anna is meant to care about, but yet we're told she doesn't. So, I don't know. Anna is a cipher. She's not a particularly interesting one, and I really don't much care about her start to finish. I do, however, enjoy the book. So it's the descriptiveness here that really works. Describing the houses, describing the town, describing the way they behave with their strange churchy stuff. Describing the school treat, which is basically taking all the kids off to a field and making them play games. It's just insight into a lifestyle that is not all that far away, but it's so far away. I personally can't imagine it. Maybe if you live in Staffordshire, you can, but all of this sounds completely alien and fascinating to me. Now, an example of the writing on page 106 is what I'm going for. You've got virtually one whole page of describing a dresser. And I'm going to read it because it's kind of awesome. Anna's kitchen was the only satisfactory apartment in the house. Its furniture included a dresser, the simple and dignified kind, which is now assiduously collected by amateurs of old oak. It had 4 long narrow shelves holding plates and saucers. The cups were hung in a row on small brass hooks screwed into the fronts of the shelves. Below the shelves were 3 drawers in a line with brass handles, and below the drawers was a large recess which held stone jars, a copper preserving saucepan, and other receptacles. 70 years of continuous polishing by a dynasty of priestesses of cleanliness had given to this dresser a rich, ripe tone which the cleverest trade trickster could not have imitated. In it was reflected a conscientious labour of generations. It had a soft and assuaged appearance, as though it had never been new and could never have been new. All its corners and edges had long lost the asperities of manufacture, and its smooth surfaces were marked by slight hollows, similar in spirit to those worn by the naked feet of pilgrims into the marble steps of a shrine. And it goes on for 2/3 of a page. I'll stop now. This is what made this book really stand out for me. I loved the writing. And if you enjoyed that passage, or you enjoyed that kind of reading experience, or you enjoy that kind of writing, then this book is for you. If you're going to get annoyed by the way people act because it's the 1930s, not for you. I guess that's what it comes to. One other little bit of writing that I really enjoyed, which is much shorter, on page 137. The chapter is the treat in which all the school children have to pay money to go and be in this field and play games. The school treat is really exciting, we are told. Anyway, Anna asks her father for money to buy tickets for herself and Agnes. He really resents paying any money at all, even though he's wealthy. They live in virtual poverty. And So any attempt to ask for money has always been a battle, as it were, where he rates her for wasting money, and yet sometimes she has to. In the end, he threw down a florin. He became perilous for the rest of the day, but the florin was an indisputable fact in Anna's pocket. I really like that. So, what else? I think I've said everything I really need to say about this book. I could discuss it at length, and I wish I had someone to discuss it with. I don't know anyone, personally, who's read Arnold Bennett, and I wish I did. There's a lot to discuss. The second last chapter has an old woman dying. And, oh yes. So because this is so much about religion, and religion is so much part of Anna's inner strugglings with everything. It's like everything she has to struggle over. But with somehow with no depth of emotion. Really weird. Very strange character. But here at the second last chapter, I'm just going to say this. The next day, Sarah Vaudrey died. Don't worry, that's not a spoiler. You won't meet Sarah Vaudrey very much. She who had never lived save in the fetters of slavery and fanaticism. I'm going to say, based on that, Arnold Bennett did not love the style of life in the Five Towns in the 1930s, and I don't think he really approved of that religion either. I'm with you, Arnold Bennett. It's going to be a while before I get over Anna of the Five Towns. I can feel a large burst of science fiction coming on anyway, but I will keep an eye out for Bennett. I do want to read more of his Five Towns books, especially once he's developed a bit more humour. If you have read Bennett, like I said, I'd love to hear from you because I don't know anyone who has. And if you would recommend going from Anna of the Five Towns to one other one in particular, let me know and I'll keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, if you've made it through all this meandering, random rambling, thank you very much. I think the next one's going to be science fiction. Maybe.